Good afternoon. It's Colin Rowe again. This week, I want to talk about who or what is God. Now, you may be wondering who I am, let alone a rather more remote and august personage. Me, I'm just a kind of interested bystander, really. I'm nobody special. I've got no particular grand authority to talk about stuff, but I kind of figure that as quite a lot of other people on YouTube are also doing their stuff, I might as well pitch in and do mine. During this self-isolating period, you have to find ways of filling your time, and maybe it's not such a bad use of time, really. So I'm nobody in particular. You can shout at the screen and say what you like, and there's no reason why I should be particularly offended, or even you to be offended by anything that I say. And I say this for a particular reason, because if I'm going to talk about who or what is God, then a million people have got a million different ideas about who or what God is. This controversy has got a long and not very venerable history. The early church up until, about 1000 AD, really, were arguing about the nature of God, and they got themselves into all sorts of tangles. We, as Christians, and this is Trinity Sunday, we sign up to the idea of three persons in one Godhead, and we have very, very precise definitions about what this means, who the persons are of the Godhead, how they relate to one another, who they consist of, what kind of persons they are. And this is deemed to be a very important and controversial matter. People have excommunicated each other over this question over the years. So it's very controversial, and people I know have very, very definite ideas about who God is and how we should relate to him, how we should believe the nature of God. Absolutely crucial to a lot of people and their belief systems. If you look at any book published about Christian doctrine, somebody like Louis Berkhoff, for instance, a very heavy tome, he goes into great detail about the nature of God. As this seems to kind of back up everything else that his doctrine is built on. And in these kinds of books, systematic theology and this kind of thing, you find a lot about the omnis, the omni qualities of God, the omniscience, and the omnipotence, and the other omni that I quite want to concentrate on and just spin a few thoughts about is omnipresence. Omnipresence. What does that mean? Well, God is said to be everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And that's a bit of an odd thought, really, isn't it? We say this almost without considering it much. What does it mean for God to be everywhere? In church, we all very obediently sit on seats that face the front mostly. We face an altar, don't we? And a big stained window, a lot of us, and candlesticks and things, and without really considering it, we sort of feel like we're facing towards God, if not the clergy who are officiating at any particular service we may attend. And it seems like this kind of direction is useful for us to be able to focus our worship and our service kind of towards God. But if God is everywhere, then that puts a bit of a different slant on it, really, doesn't it? Can we say that God is, I don't know, inside or outside? Can we say is it inside or outside us, or creation, or the planet, or the universe? What do we mean about being everywhere? And it takes on a bit of a significance, doesn't it, to say that God is everywhere? Well, David has something in Psalm 139, which is quite an interesting thing, because, we think this probably was written about 3,000 years ago. He's got some profound thoughts about where God is and how we can relate to him. Psalm 139, just a quote from it: "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the seas, even there your hand will guide me, your right hand will hold me fast." Now, first thing he says is, how can I escape from you? Well, basically he says, I can't. Anywhere and everywhere I go, wherever I find myself, in whatever situation, then God is going to be there. Which is a really nice thought, really, because when you think about it, a lot of people who believe in God are very afraid that they might lose him. They might lose their sense of the presence of God. They may consider that if they do something wrong, then they're outside of God and going against his will, and they're going to be in trouble. They're going to find themselves totally on their own. And this is an experience I've had. Very often I've felt very, very alone. But if you think about the statement about the omnipresence of God, and David saying, well, I can't get away from you. You're absolutely everywhere. You're here and you're there. You're up and you're down and you're in and you're out. You're left and you're right. You can't get away from God. So there's no such thing as kind of losing God, really. It's just a thing that our mind gets into a loop about, doesn't it? Somehow when we're feeling ashamed of ourselves, or we don't think we've thought about God for the last 5 minutes, all of a sudden we've lost God. No, I don't think we have. Not according to this thought. So God, God is, what do we say God is? Well, I think a famous theologian of the 20th century, Paul Tillich, came up with a phrase to sort of describe God, and he said he's the ground of all being. That's a pretty profound statement. The ground of all being means that he's like the substrate of all existence. He's at the bottom of everything. So you don't have to go, you don't have to dig very far to find that God is there. And in another part of the Bible, it says, in him we live and move and have our being. This is another very profound statement. It's not easy thinking of God. It's not straightforward. This is just one particular aspect that I've picked on today. I'm not sure. I wasn't aware that it was Trinity Sunday until today, when the various podcasts and YouTube videos of various services that are going on around locally and a bit further abroad have all been about this particular aspect of God, the Trinity. So in him we live and move and have our being. A very, very profound thought. We never kind of slip outside of God. Somehow everything that we can perceive, and many other things we can't see at all, we can't sense, and maybe we just don't understand, why they're there or why they behave they do. Thinking about, I don't know, constellations and stars and things that are very, very far away from us, black holes, etc., as well as the things that are immediately in front of us. Why do they exist? These are important questions. Why does anything exist? Well, this is one particular idea about that. In him we live and move and have our being. Why do we exist? Why does anything exist? This is another profound thought. Why is sometimes not a very helpful question to ask. Why has this happened to me? Why is there evil in the world? Why anything? Why do people around me suffer from terrible health problems, for instance? This is a very pertinent question during the coronavirus pandemic. Why? Not a helpful question to ask. Not that I'm dodging it, but I've never found a very helpful answer to this question in many circumstances in which I've found myself. So the divine infuses everything. The divine is everything, everywhere, and in everybody. So there's no way you're going to kind of just drop out of the realm that the ground of our being governs. We're not going to get away from God anytime soon. Whatever God means to you, and he means a lot of different things to a lot of people, and I can't be much more specific, really, because philosophers as well as theologians have had a really good stab at defining God. I just find this is a way in to thinking about God, thinking about him being omnipresent and everywhere. So if God is everywhere and in everything and sustains everything, what does that say about him and his relationship to everything that exists and everybody and the way we live? Well, think about God. I mean, he's this all present. He's this all present everywhere. So you can't say really that he's on anybody's side particularly, can you? He seems to be quite dispassionate about all sorts of things that human beings care deeply about. I think, here's another controversial thought. We think about nationality and ethnicity. We draw all sorts of lines, don't we? We have these national boundaries and we take great pride in who we are as, well, in my particular case, English. I wonder if God particularly, do you think he is attached to me being English or other people being Welsh or Scottish or German or French or Zulu or Eskimo or Chinese or Malaysian or Aboriginal? If he's at the base of all being, all that is, he has this dispassionate and even-handed view, this attitude, this position from which he views everything himself, that it just is. It just is. That's the way things are. That there's no particular good or bad about being one thing or the other. My accident of being born in England and of being brought up speaking English and having British cultural values, I would say that it's very possible that God kind of says, well, fine, this is the deal that you've been handed. It doesn't really, it doesn't mean that you're especially qualified in any way because you're a particular colour or a particular race or you speak a particular language or you live in a particular place. It's neither here nor there. We are just existing. We are existing in this time and this place. And to that extent, everyone and everything has about the same significance. The fact that we exist and that we find that God is love, that means that the substrate of our existence, the ground of our being, is based in a benevolence, a caring about our welfare, and an offer of a way to live a good life if we choose it, regardless of our situation, regardless of where we come from, regardless of who we are or who we think we are. This is the basis for our existence, a grand benevolence. That's a wonderful thing, really, because when you think about the kind of state that the world appears to be in now, we have an international emergency in the pandemic, and we have additional problems that are staring us in the face that seem like almost existential threats. How can we find that? How can we join that ground of being? How can we base our consciousness on that benevolence and on that sort of basic steadfastness, that steadiness and that peace that undergirds our existence, undergirds our understanding of God? This is very important when you think about it. You might say, well, this is just ridiculous. You can't possibly find any kind of a peace or joy or confidence in our present situation. There are too many threats. Well, God is great. When you think about that, then that one expression of confidence in God, God is great. It's not just Muslims who say God is great. We Christians also say God is great. God is to be praised and magnified. He is to be worshipped as being the one great in the whole of the realm of existence. So we can, if we kind of meditate on this idea, we can also find that place, that ground of our own being, based in the great benevolence and the magnificence of that being, which is universal, absolutely universal. The same as human beings are all over the world, the same as there are vast diversities in nature that we still haven't plumbed the depths of. There are so many varieties of things. God must be really in love with what he's created, because there are so many different kinds of these things. And there are so many different kinds of human being as well. They have these different points of view, these different cultures, they have different ideas, they have so many different languages. You can't just shut out a particular block of humanity because it doesn't chime well, it doesn't sit well with your particular cultural situation. God accepts all of that, absolutely all of it. He accepts us. He accepts all of us en masse as we are. He's very happy with us, and we can find that way to a place to stand, a firm place to base our lives and live in a kind of abundance. This idea of in him we live and we move and we have our being. That's a place of overflowing life. Let us meditate on that and see if we can't arrive at that place of confidence and peace and joy, because God is everywhere. He is omnipresent.